this one again is about Gideon, and this one is called What a Dream Did for Gideon. Now remember, Gideon was a really strong, powerful figure in ancient Israel, and he stood up for God, and he had faith in God, and he trusted God, and he excelled because of his faith and trust in God. So the story goes. The Midianites were making dreadful trouble for everybody, and especially for the Hebrews. These Arabs, the Midianites were Arabs, never wanted to live anywhere but in tents. And they kept moving most of the time, skimming across the desert on swift horses or racing on their fleet of dromedaries was the only kind of work these Arabs ever wanted to do. But they needed something to eat and clothes to wear, of course. How could they get these good things if they would not work? Live in America today. No, I'm sorry. From their neighbors who lived in towns, who had houses and raised wheat and cattle for food. The Hebrews worked and had the good things these fierce Arabs wanted. So, into the Hebrews' country came the Arab robbers, and their shabby black goatskin tents were pitched all over the beautiful plain, once covered with fields of wheat, fruit trees, and fine cattle. Now the wheat fields of the Hebrews made rich pastures for the Arabs' camels and for their lean cattle. The Hebrews' goats and sheep were stolen from them in order that the Arabs could have more skins for their tents and warm wool for their clothes. Now Gideon was going to drive away these bad neighbors. He, with the 300 men that he had chosen by the brook, which I read to you about last time, when the sun set that night, he and his helpers must have peered over the cliffs and looked into the valley below. What a noisy crowd was there, so many camels and so many men that it would take you a whole hour to count them. But Gideon was not going to try to fight them. God had taught him a better way. And by this better way, he was going to save his people from these terrible visitors from the desert. It must have been a dark, cloudy night with no moon and few stars when Gideon and his servant Purah went softly down the mountainside to visit the Arab campsite. The watchmen set to guard the camp were telling each other stories, and one Arab soldier had had a strange dream. And he told while he told his dream, the soldier and his companion must have been pacing back and forth in the glow of the watchfire. Gideon could see them in the firelight while he and Purah lay still in the shadow of the rocks. Not an Arab knew that the brave Gideon was near. This was the soldier's dream. He had seen a cake of barley bread fall into the Arab camp, and this cake had broken down a tent. And that means, exclaimed the listener, that Gideon is going to destroy our army. Back went Gideon and Purah their feet must have had wings on them. They went so fast indeed. Gideon was happy. He had learned that the Arabs were afraid of him. He knew that people who were afraid are easily beaten. And that is very true, and something we should keep in mind. When we're fearful and we've been weakened by the enemy, and the enemy, of course, is the devil. Out he called his 300 warriors. In one hand, each of them carried a pitcher with a burning torch inside of it. In the other hand, each one held a trumpet. Now these trumpets could make a great noise, and when they were blown out among the hills, it would sound as if they were 10 times 300 trumpets. 10 times. 3,000. Quietly down the mountainside, the men crept with Gideon. 100 of the men went to one side of the Arab camp, and another 100 went to the other side of the Arab camp. The 300 Hebrew warriors made a circle around the Arabs' camp. Not a sound was heard, nor the flash of a torch seen. It was about 10 o'clock that night. The Arab robbers probably were asleep, and perhaps some of them were dreaming about the barley cakes. Others may have smacked their lips as they dreamed of the fine fat sheep they would take from the Hebrews the next morning. And suddenly all around them flashed lights. As Gideon's 300 men smashed their pitchers, clay pitchers, the startled Arabs must have thought the whole camp was breaking to pieces. 300 trumpets shrieked out in the dark of night, and as Gideon and his men shouted, "For Jehovah and for Gideon," and then there was a stampede among the Arab army. "Let us run away before we are all killed by these Hebrews. was probably what every Arab was thinking at the time, and run they did. It was so dark that they could not tell an Arab from a Hebrew. So they drew their swords and began to fight one another, and the great Arab army killed many of its own soldiers. The cattle and camels and sheep and goats were left behind the fleeing Arabs. Tents were torn down as the soldiers rode past on their way back to the desert. Out from the caves where they had been hiding swarmed the Hebrews, following close after Gideon and his 300 men who were chasing the frightened Arabs. Down the hills, across the plain, and beyond the river swept the Arab host. Many of them never returned to their desert homes. They were slain by their own swords and by the Hebrew warriors. Gideon, used of God, had saved the country. Now, when I come back next time, I'm going to tell you some stories of Jotham and Samson. And if you remember, Samson is one of the one of the strongest men in the whole Bible. And so next time we'll take a look at that. I hope you enjoyed the story today. And remember, trust God, believe in God, have faith in God, have faith that He's going to do what He says He's going to do. And He is always faithful. And we have to be always faithful to Him. I'll see you real soon. Love each and every one of you, and God bless you. Bye-bye. Now, how am I supposed to get anything done? This is Little Gray, my new little buddy, Charlie's baby. There's the mouse for my computer. He's not letting me get to work. But I don't have the heart to disturb him because he's sleeping so quietly and looks so sweet. That is my little boy.